What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be building some arrows. I haven't shown this on this channel before, but it's something I really love to do. I really love building my own arrows. Just a couple days ago I got these done for my dad. We did a 4-fletch 2-inch fusion vane. Looks super rad on these gold tip Velocity XT 300s with a 100 grain brass insert and a 100 grain field point. So these things should be hitting super hard for him. We're gonna have to get that sighted in here shortly, but I figured I'd pull out the camera for mine. So what we're going here, we've got an Easton Axis 5mm, and these are a 260 spine. So I know you're probably thinking that's super stiff spine. I think they're like 10 or 11 grains per inch or something, so super heavy, super stiff spine. Obviously wouldn't be shooting that out of a normal setup, but this is going to be shot out of my Hoyt Factor Turbo, and this is an 80-pound bow. I don't know if you can see it down here, right there. 70 to 80-pound limbs on this bad boy, and it's a turbo model. So it's kicking out some serious speed, some serious kinetic energy. So we're going to need an arrow to match that. Also, Dad and I are going to be going on a hog hunt, hopefully next summer sometime. And I wanted something that's going to be hitting super hard in case we hit any of those big shields on those boar hogs or hit a bone on a shoulder bone on one of those hogs. I want to make sure fixed blade broadhead, super heavy arrow, lots of FOC. It's going to blow right through it. So this should be fun. We're going to be building a real heavy arrow here. I think Dad's ended up being, with the 100 grains of brass, those ended up being right around 500 grain total arrow weight. He was shooting a 398, so that's almost a 100 grain increase for him. So we're going to definitely have to sight that in, because it's going to probably be shooting a little low, obviously because of the heavier arrow. And these, I'm hoping when they're done, they're going to be at 600 grains, maybe a little more. And I'm hoping that they won't give me too much tuning problem out of that 80-pound turbo. But so first things first, we're going to get these cut down, and then I'm just going to kind of show you guys quick and easy how I build my arrows to get the most out of them, and I'm going to be showing you what I'm going to be putting on these specific arrows. So let's get right to it. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do, well actually the first thing I did is I pulled all the nocks out of the end of these arrows so there's nothing on either side. And the reason I'm doing that is because before I cut anything, I'm going to actually spin these arrows, and a lot of times when you go to a shop, they're just going to cut the front half of the arrow off and just go on their way. But actually, a lot of times the back end can be more wobbly than the front end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each arrow and I'm going to spin them on this arrow spinner, and I'm going to mark whichever side is actually wobbling more, and then I'm going to cut that side off, and then that's going to give me the straightest arrow possible. It will kind of mess up where your logos go, but I'm just going to take acetone and take these logos off anyway, so then you won't even be able to tell. And it's going to be able to give me the most accurate arrows that I can build out of this set. These aren't the match grades, unfortunately. I wanted the match grades, but they were out of stock, and I wanted to get this done. So I just went ahead and ordered the 5 mils, and cutting them this way is going to basically make them match grade as it is. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to spin them, and I'm going to mark with a little paint marker, this little golden Sharpie, which side is the wobbly side, and then that's the side I'm going to cut. So let's get right to it. Alright guys, just got done cutting the arrows, and I want to show you this because I want to express how important it is to do what I just did if you want to shoot really long ranges and if you want to practice out at like 80, 90, 100, 110, 120 yards with a bow. You have to get your arrows as straight as possible because, like I said, normally most people in most shops are just going to cut off the fronts, be done with it. Most people don't shoot past 40 yards, and that's fine if you're going to shoot inside 40 yards. Like most bows are fast enough and everything that like not having a super straight arrow doesn't really matter. It's still going to be able to sight in well. You're still going to be able to group, you know, decent groups. But if you want to be really accurate as much as you can be and shoot out to those longer distances, look at how many arrows, the back ends were the non-straight ends. The back ends are what I'm going to cut off. It was 6. So 6 out of 12, half of the arrows would have been not as straight if I just cut off the fronts. But these 6, I'm going to cut off the back half and try to straighten them up. And then after I cut them all the way, then I'm going to also mark the less straight end even after I cut them, because you're not going to get these arrows perfectly straight. They're not super high quality, expensive pro comps or anything like that. I mean, they're $100 a dozen, so we're just doing what we can. And that's going to tell me which end I'm going to put the knock on and which end I'm going to put the point on, because it's more important to have the straighter side be on the knocking side, because that's the side of the arrow that the string's coming in direct contact with and is going to push off of. So you want it to push out of the bow as straight as it can be. So after we cut these down and get them straight as we can there, we're still going to mark which side is straighter, and that's the side that the knock's going to go in. We're going to get rid of the label so you'll never tell which side was ever supposed to be in the front, and we're going to go from there. So let's get cutting. Alright guys, we just got all of our arrows cut to the right length, and now is another really important step. If you're going to be cutting your own arrows, or even if you're taking them to a shop, make sure they do this after they cut them. Even on both sides, it's very important because the saw is not always going to be a perfect 90. This is a perfect 90. This is a 90-degree edge, and it's got some sandpaper on it, and you're basically just going to square the ends of your arrows by rolling them against this sandpaper. If your shop's not doing this when they're cutting your arrows, and if you're not doing this when you're cutting your arrows, you're wasting your time, because the saw blade's not always going to be 90. This is the only way you're going to get those arrows perfect. So let's go ahead and get them all squared off both ends. Alright guys, so now we've got the arrows cut to length, sanded a clean, perfect 90 on both ends, and now, like I said, because of the way I cut them from each end, depending on the straightness, the labels are now kind of all in different places, as you can see. So I'm very OCD, so I'm going to go ahead and just take some acetone and get rid of the labels, so that way when they're in a quiver or just in my pouch, they're not going to be all mismatched and just kind of driving me crazy. You don't even have to do this step if that's not going to bother you, but I know it's going to bother me, so I'm going to take some acetone and I'm going to wipe these off. I won't show you guys that part because it's very boring, but we're going to do that next, and then we'll get back to the next step. Alright, so just got done with the acetone, taking the labels off. As you can see, it's all just black carbon now, no labels anywhere. So we're back to square one basically, and this is something that I've started doing recently after when I get to this step. This was after watching a Levi Morgan video. Is I'm going to spin these all again, and whichever side is the straightest now, meaning the least amount of wobble, that's the side that I'm going to go ahead and insert the knock back into, because I want the straightest side I can to be on the side that the string's going to be pushing on, to make sure it's pushing completely flat and sending that arrow downrange as straight as possible. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to respin these, and I'm going to put the ends that I want the knock in towards this towel, and then I'm going to put the knocks in, and then we're going to go ahead and move on to inserts. Alright, so we got our knock ends figured out, and now we're just going to take some alcohol and some Q-tips, and we're going to clean out the ends really good before we put the knocks in. There's no glue. You definitely don't want to glue knocks in. Anybody that tries to, it's just don't do it. You might have to do that for some kind of target application or something, but hunting reasons or pretty much anything else, do not glue knocks in. You want to be able to index your arrows. You want to be able to take knocks in and out if you break one or something, so just don't glue them. But we still want them to be clean because we don't want anything in there to impede the way the knock's going to seat on the end of the shaft. So we're going to clean those out and get the knocks in and move on to our inserts. Alright, you can use whatever you want. I have this little half of a Coke can. I'm just going to put a little bit of alcohol in there, enough to soak the Q-tips in. And just make sure you remember which ends are your knock sides, and you're just going to take the Q-tips and just give them a nice cleaning. You can see how much is going to come out of there. Go until you can't see any more black. You don't want any carbon dust in there. It's going to be even more important when we put inserts in. So it's getting better. Don't be afraid to use Q-tips, they're not that expensive. But you see that's how you want it. You want it to come out nice and clean. Make sure you get the edges. And then that one's ready for a knock. So I'm going to do these other ones real quick, and we'll go ahead and put the knocks in. Alright guys, we have all the ends of these arrows clean now. The knock sides are facing you guys, and we're going to go ahead and install the knocks. We're just using the standard Easton knocks that came on these axis arrows. Eventually, when we get closer to the hunt and to using this bow, I may opt for some nocturnals or some type of a lighted knock, but for now we're just going to go ahead and throw back in the knocks that came with these arrows. So let's do that right now. When you're installing knocks, it's important to not force it. You're going to want to kind of slowly twist it as you go in. A lot of guys recommend using like a string wax or something. I personally don't like doing that unless the knocks are being very finicky. So for this, hopefully I'm not going to have to do that, but if they are having some trouble going in, putting a little bit of wax on the end and twisting them as you go in it'll help get them in there nice and snug. Alright, so all 12 arrows, Nocks went in just fine. They're all flush. Didn't have to fight any of them. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the business end and getting some inserts in these bad boys. Alright guys, for the inserts for these arrows, I wanted something a little heavier and a little bit more durable. Like I said, I'm going to be probably shooting fixed blades out of this primarily for bigger game like hog and things like that. And like I said, I put brass inserts in Dad's arrows for this hog hunt, and I think those will work really well. I've watched a lot of people have great success with those, but like I said, I'm shooting an 80-pound bow, and it's a turbo model, so it's kicking these arrows out with a lot of force, so I figured it could handle something even a little bit beefier than a 100-grain brass insert. So what I actually went with are these insert-outsert systems from Ethics Archery. It's an adjustable inner core, so this is your inside piece that goes down the shaft of the arrow like a standard insert with your threading, and all these little bars here are weighted increments that you can cut off to get this to suit your needs perfectly. Anywhere from 130 grains to 220 grains. These are pretty heavy duty stainless steel inserts. I think I'm going to go ahead and try it with the full length 220 grains, and hopefully I won't run into any tuning issues with that. But basically this goes down in the shaft, and then this stainless steel sleeve is going to slide over it and also get glued on, and that's going to make the front of your arrow basically indestructible. It's going to give you some crazy FOC, and Ethics Archery makes these for pretty much any brand you can think of. This is my first time using them, so hopefully they're going to work out good. I've heard a lot of good things about them, but I'm really excited to try these. So this is what we're going to be going with, so let's get right to it. Alright, first things first is we're going to go ahead and clean all of the insert ends of our arrows, and then before we put them in, we're also going to wipe down these inserts with some alcohol. So let's do that right now. Alright guys, got all of our components cleaned and ready to go. To do these inserts, I'm going to be using this Cool Blue Bonning hot melt. I used to use super glues and CA glues, and they worked okay, but you don't have a lot of working time, and if you mess up, you're kind of screwed. But this stuff, you can just heat it right back up, pull it out, and start over. So I've been really digging this hot melt stuff. Especially for these really long inserts, because you don't have a lot of wiggle room. You got to get them in and get them in there right. So that's what we're going to be using. I've got this little candle here that's going to be my flame. I also have a lighter in case I need to heat up some extra pieces. You can also use like a little cooking torch like this, but unfortunately mine's out of gas, so we're using the candle as a backup. And I've got one of my biggest field points that I'm going to be using to insert these with. This is a 150 grain field point that I use out of my recurve. It's going to give me something to hold on to and be able to heat up this insert to go into our shafts. Don't be worried about heating up the carbon. You don't want to put direct flame on the carbon, but putting these in there is going to be no problem. They'll be able to handle it. Another reason I like the hot melt is as I'm putting the components together, I can spin the arrow with this insert in it, and I can rotate the insert as long as the glue hasn't set yet, to get it spinning perfect to where the best place for the insert to sit at. So that's what we're going to do. I've got a cup of cold water here to help. Once I get this where I need it, I'm just going to go straight into cold water. It'll help set that glue, and easy peasy, lemon squeezy. We're going to be done. Let's get right into it. Alright guys, so we have all the inserts in. They all went in very good. That's why I love the hot melt. You got plenty of time to work with it. You can always heat it up and move it around. So now we need to put these sleeves on, like so, like that. They just go right down over there. They go past the regular insert by about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. So the other good part about hot melt with these inserts is you don't have to worry about how far down the shaft you go with the glue. If you go too far, it's not a big deal, because once it hardens in the water, you can just peel it right off, unlike some of the super glues that you might use. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna heat up some more hot melt, put it on the shafts here, and then we're gonna get the outside sleeves on them. Alright guys, so we had a slight change of plans. I was planning on gluing these sleeves onto these arrow shafts with the hot melt, just like I did the inserts, but because of how tight the tolerances are for these and how well they're manufactured, there's not much space between the sleeve and the arrow shaft. So I was having the trouble of, every time I would try to slide this on, it would pretty much just push all the hot melt out without keeping any between this, so it would just still be spinning. And if that's the case, then it's really just pointless to glue it. And I know I've watched on their website that you can just slide these on because the broadhead does lock it in place. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. Unless I start running into problems with it, then I might use some super glue like they do on their videos to lock these down. But like I said, the broadheads do lock them down, like to where they're not gonna spin, they're not gonna move. So I think I'm just gonna go with that. These are the broadheads I'm planning on using with this bow and this setup, are these Trophy Taker shuttle T-locks. And man, this thing looks mean. They spin great. Let me put you down in here so you can kind of see. I mean, they, even with those big inserts and those sleeves, I mean, a fixed blade broadhead to be spinning like that, absolutely beautiful. And that's the kind of stuff, the performance you can get out of pretty standard arrows if you take your time and do these steps that I'm showing you. So we're gonna throw these sleeves on, throw the broadheads on, and then we're gonna get the fletching. And then these arrows are hopefully gonna be ready, but the bow is not. That's gonna be coming after all this arrow building's done. That's when we can finally start on the bow. I wanted to make sure I had the arrows ready, so that when we did start on the bow, we could go full tuning, like all the way through without having to wait on building arrows. So I'm building these arrows first, and then we're gonna get to the bow. So let's get fletching. All right guys, it is time to fletch these shafts. Let me show you what we're working with here. So for these shafts, I'm going to be doing, I believe, I was on the fence between a 3 and a 4 fletch, but I think I'm gonna go with a 3 fletch just because they are a 5mm shaft, and I don't think I would run into any problems with a 4 fletch, but I think I'm just gonna go with the 3 fletch and see how that works out for me. I'm going to be using a 3-inch fusion vane from Q2I Archery or Norway Industries. I think they might be the same company. I don't know which one it is now or who bought who. But I've had great success with these vanes. I love the AE vanes, but I'm going back to these just because they're really easy to get to stick and they're really easy to fletch. I have them on a lot of stuff. I'm going with the pink and white. These are just some wraps I got off eBay. I really like them. They're just a solid white with a little black accent. I really like a white wrap because it helps really make the blood stand out on a pass-through, and you can tell what kind of blood you're dealing with if you're questioning the shot. And for these fusion vanes, I've had great luck just using this Loctite Super Control Gel or Ultra Gel Control. It's super easy to apply with these little squeezers, and it works really good, dries really fast, and it's easy to control. It's not runny. For these fusion vanes, for like a blazer vane, or really any vane that doesn't require a specific prep from the manufacturer, the way like an AAE would or a TAC vane would, where you need to use their specific glues and products, I've had great success with this stuff. But before we do that, we're going to actually take these shafts and we're going to weigh them, and we're going to separate them into piles based on light, heavy, and then kind of in the middle, and then that way we can do the same with the vanes, and we can get them as close to each other as we can for consistency purposes. Alright guys, we are already at, here let me bring you in on this. We're already at 560 grains with no vanes and no broadheads. It's kind of scaring me, thinking these might end up being a little too heavy for what we're trying to do here, but we're gonna roll with it. 560. All right, so we're gonna start with that as our number, and then go from there in terms of either close to 560, heavier, or lighter, and that's how we're gonna separate them. So 560 is going in the middle. Dang, that's almost dead on. 559.2, just like the last one. It's also going to go in the middle. $558.6, so that's going to go to the left. $559.2, another one right on the money. When you buy good quality stuff like this, guys, this is what you'll get. You won't have to do as much work on this kind of stuff. As I say that, this one might be the one that I had to cut down just a little bit shorter than the rest because I had messed up. So this one's 555, so this one's super light, so we're going to go way on the left with that one. But I did have to cut one slightly shorter than the rest because I messed up the initial cut, so I had to take it down to where I could flatten it. And I think that was the one, because at 559.0, these are all right on the money for the most part, except for that one that I had to cut short. All right. 560.4, so this one's a bit heavy. $558.6, slightly light, but not a lot, so that's going to go on the left. $559.6, another one really close there. $559.4, another one really close. $559.0, another one right in there. And guys, I'm doing all this with pretty basic tools. I mean, you do have to buy some stuff, but I mean, if you're into archery, it's going to be worth it. I do a lot of friends stuff, and I do all my family stuff, but I don't have the fanciest saws, the fanciest jigs, the fanciest scales, and all that stuff. I'm just kind of making do with what I got, but you can get extremely accurate if you're just willing to put in some time and to learn a few things. And 558.6, so another one slightly light. So out of that full dozen there that we made, we have this one, which is just a little bit heavy, and it's only by like a grain or two. It's nothing even like that's really probably even going to be noticeable. These are all within like 0.1 grain of each other, which is insane. A couple that are a little bit light, again, just like 1 or 2 grains. And then this one's light by like 4 or 5 grains, but that is because I had to cut this one shorter than the rest. So that was on me, not on the arrow manufacturers or Easton or anybody. But it still should fly fine. Because of how heavy it is, I don't think it's going to be noticeable difference-wise. So now we're going to weigh out some fletchings and just make sure that they're fairly close too. We're going to get an average. We're going to put the average ones in here to be fletched with these. We're going to put the light ones with this heavy arrow. We're going to put the heavy fletchings with these lighter arrows, just to try to get everything as close as we can to the final product. Can't really measure the wraps, obviously, because they're pretty negligible and because they're already on this paper together. So let's get to measuring out the veins, and we'll hopefully start fletching soon. We're going to start with the pink veins. 10.4, so that's going to go in the middle. 10.6, that's going to go in the middle too. So 10.4 is going to be my start, I guess, or 10 point something, and we're going to try to keep them all within, I'd say like 3 grains is where I'll start actually dividing them. If they're within 3 grains of each other, they're just going to go in the same pile. 10.4, so all these are just going in the same pile right now, but we're just making sure there's no crazy outliers. Like this one's a little heavy, 10.8, so I'm going to put that one on the heavy side. 11, another one, heavy side. I don't know what these are actually supposed to be from the manufacturer. I would say 10 to 11, but just from what I'm getting, 10.4, that's going to go in the middle. 10.8, it's going to go on the heavy side. 10.4, it's going to go in the middle. 10.4 is going to go in the middle. 10.6 also going to stay in the middle. 10.6 is going to stay in the middle. Now we're going to do the same thing for the white ones. 9.8. See, so this is why you do this, because these white ones are actually look like they might be a lot lighter than the pink ones. So that one, 9.8 is going to go in the middle for now. 9.8. 9.8. So these have been pretty consistent. They're just a lot lighter. 9.8. 9.4. That's going to go a little on the light side. 9.4 again on the light side. And you might be wondering why I'm doing this, and like, you absolutely don't have to do this. I've killed plenty of deer before I even started making arrows this way or learning how to do this, but I'm just trying to be as accurate as I can possibly be and be able to take advantage of longer shots and be completely confident in my gear, knowing that it's going to perform. But you obviously don't have to go through all these steps. I mean, it's definitely a lot of overkill, but if you're passionate about something and if you want to take that next step in being a better archer and a better bow hunter, this is something that I would recommend either having your shop do or you look into doing yourself. Building arrows can be really fun. You get a lot more customization, and it's just a really rewarding experience doing something yourself and then ended up using it later on. 9.6, that'll go in the middle. 10 even, so it's going to go on the heavy side. 9.8, that's going to go in the middle. 9.6 is going to go in the middle. 9.6 is going to go in the middle. 9.6 is going to go in the middle. 9.6. 9.4. 9.4. 9.4. 9.6. 9.6. So pretty consistent. I like that about these veins so far. 9.8, that's going to go in the middle still, I'd say. 9.8, we'll actually put that one on the heavy side because I'm going to need an extra one of the heavier ones. 9.8, put that on the heavy side. And 9.8. Okay, so now let me kind of show you why I did that so you can get a little bit better visual on it. So these are the piles I split these into, right? These are going to be lighter, average, heavier. These are all average, and these are heavier. And remember how I said this arrow was really light because I made that mistake and cut it a little low? But let's say even if you didn't cut one a little short and you had one that was super light, you can take your heavier components over here, put them on the lightest shaft, and then it'll bring them all back to a better average, and you'll have less discrepancy between shafts, and you hopefully will have better accuracy because of that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put these heavier components on these lighter shafts, especially this one, and then put the lighter components on the heavier shafts, and then that'll hopefully bring us a good average between weights when we're all said and done. So let's get to fletching. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take these white wraps, and you're going to use a mouse pad or something soft like this. You're going to peel one off, make sure you orient it the right way, and then you're going to take your shaft and you're going to basically line up the back of the cresting on the back of the shaft right before the nock. Make sure it's all flat. You're going to press and you're going to roll towards yourself. I need to clean these shafts off first because I haven't done that yet. So I'm going to rub these shafts down with alcohol, then we're going to get back to doing that. Alright, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping these. And then you're going to just press down and roll towards yourself. And then I like to take, as long as my shirt's clean, and just kind of run that seam. Make sure it sits, and then make sure you keep your arrows in order. And we're just going to run through this and get all these wrapped. I really prefer like a vinyl wrap like this over like one of those like quick fletch wraps where you would like put it in the boiling water. I think these work a lot better. Alright you guys, we got them all wrapped up. Still got them in order. This is the really light one. These are the lighter ones. These are all the average ones. And this is the really heavy one. You might notice I didn't crest one of the average ones because I'm going to need to save that to do my bear shaft tuning for that bow. later on in this whole build series. This is going to be part 1. And I don't have a lot of space left on this card, so I'm going to fletch one arrow, show you how I'm going to do it, and then I'll bring you back once I have them all fletched. So let's get into that one. Alright, we're going to start on one of the average ones. We're going to start with those. I'm using a Bitsenberger jig here. Really good jigs. Been using this for a while now. I've really liked it. I already have it set on my 3 fletch setting. It's super easy to change. And I already have it marked out on here on these little dashes where I like to set mine for my face relief. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and dry clamp it with no glue and try to make sure that it's seating right on the jig itself. You want to make sure you do this before you start putting glue on here, or else you could have some issues. So just make sure that everything's going to seat properly and it's adjusted correctly. If it's not, you have to play with these dials in and out. But from what I can tell, it looks to be seated very well. So we're going to go ahead and roll on. So what I'm going to do is, like I said before, using this Loctite Super Control Dowel. And I'm just going to, let's see if you can see this on here. Going to make a nice fine bead all the way down. Make sure it's all in the entire thing. You don't want any air bubbles or any dry spaces. And then you can go ahead and kind of give it one of these if you need to, just to make sure there's glue on everything. Don't need a whole lot, but you definitely want to have enough. You don't want any dry spots where it's going to lift. And then you're going to make sure by twisting your arrow on here, you're going to make sure your seam, you're not putting a fletching directly on a seam of a wrap. You definitely don't want to do that. You're going to go ahead and, I always put the back of the fletching clamp down first, seat it against the base, and then you're just going to press it down on there and make sure that you got good contact. And then you're going to give that about, I usually give them about 20 seconds or so. This Loctite gel dries really quick, but we're going to go white, white, pink on this one. And then we'll have a finished arrow. And you're going to go ahead and press and slide out. And then we're going to go ahead and do that again. We're going to go white again. Line everything up. Once again, give it a nice bead of glue. That's why I really like this Loctite, because it's easy to control how much glue you're putting on here. With these little side handles, make sure we get it all kind of evened out. And go ahead and set the base down first and press. And I'm thinking doing the 3 fletch, because these are 3-inch vanes, 3 of them should be enough to give me good steering characteristics on a fixed blade broadhead, even without doing the 4 fletch. But only time will tell. That's why I'm doing it early, so I'll have plenty of time to practice with this rig, get it all fine-tuned, and make any adjustments that I need to before we end up going on any hunts that I'm going to be needing to use this 80-pound bow. I have my carbon spider set at 70 pounds and all set up with a lighter arrow for all the whitetail hunting and stuff I still have left to do. And yeah, that's going to be that. So this glue dries pretty quick. So you're going to release, slide it up out of the way without touching the vane, make sure it sits right. And then we're going to go on to our last one here. This is going to be the pink one. Same thing, line it up in your clamp. Give it a nice bead of glue. Make sure that's all spread out on the entire base of the vane. Back down first, and then take the front down. Make sure it's seated well, good contact all the way across. Give it a little bit of wait time. And then squeeze and lift away. And be careful when you're taking it out not to hit the veins. And then you can kind of run your finger if you want and get rid of, you can use a Q-tip or a paper towel, kind of get rid of that excess glue that's in between that's squeezed out, because you don't really need that. Make sure you didn't get any lifting or anything like that. And just like that, we have ourselves a perfectly fletched arrow ready for the final steps. So I'm going to go ahead and knock out the rest of these arrows, and I'll get back with you guys when they're all done. Alright y'all, we got them all fletched up here, except for our bear shaft that we're going to use for bear shaft tuning later. And we got this one down here. We got one last thing that we're going to do to these that I'm just not going to bore you guys with. It's called tipping and tailing. Basically you take some slow curing glue that's not a super glue really. I use Fletch Dye Platinum. And you're going to just put a dot of the glue on the front end of each fletching and the back end of each fletching on all the arrows. That's going to keep them from, if they pass through a target, pass through a deer, it's going to keep that edge from wanting to lift up. It's going to provide like a smooth transition. So that's all that is. We're going to have to do that. But before we get off here, I'm going to give you some final numbers on these arrows. I'm going to calculate the FOC real quick and give you a total weight that we ended up with. Alright y'all, we just did a quick FOC calculation. This is on bowhunting.com, super simple. You measure your arrow length from the throat of your nock to the end of your insert, which for these arrows is going to be 29.25 or 2/8. And then you measure the distance from your nock, the throat of your nock, to your balance point. You can pretty much just balance it on your finger and get a rough guess. Measure that, which for this was going to be 20 2/8. And our resulting FOC for these arrows is 19.2, which is actually really good. That's like right in the sweet spot. Like I think personally 15 to 20, or even if a little lower than 15, 12 to 20% FOC is really good for hunting rigs. So 19.2 is great FOC, which is kind of making me, I thought it was going to be a lot more with how heavy these inserts are, but the arrows themselves are also really heavy. So that's a good thing. So now we're going to get a total arrow weight for these bad boys. Alright, scale is all zeroed out. I'm going to grab this one. This is with a 100 grain broadhead. That's kind of why I went for the heavier insert, was so that I could shoot just a 100 grain broadhead and not have to go to like a 200 grain broadhead. I wanted more weight in the inserts, that I'd have more broadhead options, because there obviously are more 100 grain broadheads out there than 200 grains. They're a lot easier to find and a lot more variety. So let's get that balance there. Let it all. We are 3 grains, less than 3 grains shy of a 700 grain arrow. That's insane. Let me grab this heaviest one here on the right and see if it's at 700 grains. But I'm just gonna round. That's a 700 grain arrow. Like, I'm sorry, that's a 700 grain arrow. 700 grains with pretty much 20% FOC. I don't care. Out of an 80-pound bow, turbo, Hoyt. I haven't got the FPS yet, but we're gonna definitely get that. There ain't nothing that this bow isn't gonna shoot through. So let's see if this heaviest arrow will get to 700 before we end this video. Alright, so I got the heaviest one on here, and the heaviest one's at 698.4. So just like basically a grain off of the other one, which is what I wanted. I wanted them as close as possible. That's how I explained to you guys before how I built them. But still, these are 700 grain arrows that we're going to be shooting out of this bad boy. I cannot wait to keep going on this bow build. We got the arrows done, so that means we can just go full steam ahead on this build. So stay tuned for that. We're going to go straight into, well actually, before we do the rest and all that, I got a little surprise for this bow that we're going to do on the next video, so stay tuned for this. But we're going to do a Hoyt buckskin on a budget. That's going to be the next video. Thank you guys for watching this arrow video. As always, follow me on Instagram, t.s_outdoors. I'll link my last video up here. subscribe right here somewhere, and we'll see you on the next video.